Viewers, welcome to Meet the Leader program. Today we are extremely honored to be in Ghana under the hospitality of former President John Kufuor. And we are going to discuss some critical challenges and issues on leadership. Thank you much for according us time in Ghana.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. There is a belief that family background do influence leadership style and aspirations. You were born and raised up in Kumasi as a seventh child of a family of 10 children. How did your background influence your leadership aspirations, skills, and exposure?
And naturally, you answer this question with hindsight, because as you grow in it, you may not be aware that the family influences are shaping you for leadership. But truly, on hindsight, I find that it's a truism. That your background in terms of family and upbringing tend to be crucial eventually when you find yourself a leader. I was born in this city, Kumasi, the second city of Ghana, and which is quite traditional. This is the seat of the King of Ashanti. And even though Ghana is a republic now, Ashanti still retains the monarchy, which is, I believe, over 300 years old. And I happen to have been born into this family that has been very closely connected with the monarchy, family-wise, from the beginnings of the founding of the kingdom. My family, maternal family, and the king's family have been intermarrying right from the beginnings of the kingdom. And even to this generation, the two families are still very connected. Example is my sister, the firstborn, was the wife of the king time I was born. So the king of Ashanti then, 1938, was my brother-in-law. I grew up in his palace. He died, I believe, 1970 or so, when I was already member of parliament at the age of 30. So you can see where I'm coming from. My father, too, was one of the 7 divisional chieftains or clans of Ashanti in Kumasi, and again closely connected with the king. My mother, in her own right, was also what in common parlance we describe as queen mother. That is, within my mother's side too, there was royalty. So for background, you see that I was born into leadership. I was raised on what I would describe as best practices of leadership, because my father, my mother, my preeminent brother-in-law, king of people, about 4 or 5 million population, I grew up knowing nothing but what I saw around these people, leading people, governing people. So perhaps I imbibed the leadership traits without being conscious that this was it. Eventually, when I started schooling, I was privileged to have had some of the best education you could have anywhere, both here in Ghana and also externally. It so happened the subjects I tended to like also made for looking at or studying leadership around the world, elsewhere. For instance, I loved history. I loved the classics. And without doing it consciously for leadership, I learned about what obtained in, say, the ancient times, Roman Empire and so forth and so on. And then into current times too, some of the great leaders, school students, tend to be taught about. Then I chose to be a lawyer because I think I found myself in terms of subjects that my inclinations were there. So studying law, loving history, and learning about great leaders and great men, and then being born into this family I've described about, naturally all came together to position me. And then to crown it all, I found by the time I was called to the bar at the age of 22 in Britain, there was a strong urge in me to do politics. And the opportunity came around 1968, 69, when I had just turned 30. 69, I was already member of Parliament of Ghana. And the party I joined, I was a founding member of that party that took government that year, also made me the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ghana. So you could see at that young age, being exposed this way to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that saw me traveling every year for 3 years to the United Nations, to the Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa, giving me opportunity to interact with some of the biggest names of those times. For instance, on the African continent, I met people like the famed Nyerere of Tanzania. I met Sadat, on the death, yes, before, just after. In fact, my government sent a delegation to attend Nasser's funeral, and I was one. And that was when Sadat, for instance, was assuming leadership of the great nation of Egypt. I met so many of our great men on our continent. And through the non-aligned movement too, I came across people like Indira Gandhi. On the continent, let me revert to the continent, I met Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, and it kept on. That was just 30. And I believe all these developments shaped me into what I became. So family, yes, and then surroundings, and then of course education.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This is a rich history and the background. Though you are an Oxford graduate, you spent several years into business. To what extent exposure to business life influenced your thinking as a leader later on, especially as a president of a great nation like Ghana?
Let me say, when you are talking business, from my standpoint, the core of business is entrepreneurship. Yes. And to me, when a person is called businessman, that person is the entrepreneur, the risk taker. Yes. Risk taking. Yeah. And a leader, in a way, is a risk taker. So exposure to business. And I had also some family members who were quite outstanding in business. For instance, an uncle at that time was perhaps the biggest timber magnate in the country. And I was quite close with him. And he was had sawmills, about 2 or 3 of them, was exporting internationally. And so being close to him gave me insights. And again, I found I was naturally drawn in that direction. And you take a risk It could be calculated, but you are never sure you are going to win. A leader, I believe a true leader, must have a bit of it, of that trait, risk-taking. Because a leader, in many senses, tends to stand alone.
Yes.
And the leader's role is to be able to sort of carry the people he leads with him. It's not always you manage to get your people to follow you. Perhaps on some decision you may slip from favor with the people, and you will take the knocks all by yourself. This is why from ancient times it's been said, the uneasy lies the wearer of the crown. So even as your people are sleeping, snoring, and enjoying their dreams, sometimes you are tossing about because you want to get a way forward. And this is business. And so my exposure there, risk-taking, and always being confronted with thinking outside the box, I believe also help to shape the leader.
President Kufuor, in 1996, you ran for the presidency with Jenny Rawlings then, and you lost to Jenny Rawlings.
Yes.
But 4 years later, in 2000, you came back again and you ran for the president and you won. Share with African leaders these lessons and this experience.
Well, you'd remember Jerry Rawlings, as a young man, had come into office or had taken office through a coup d'etat as president or head of state of Ghana. And he stayed on there from 82 to 96. That is how many years? It will be about 14 years. So he was quite adept as a head of state.
Yeah.
We are not discussing democratic credentials or anything, or even the quality of governance. But he'd been there 14 long years, and 92, he had converted himself from being a military dictator, after he'd been in power for about 10 years already as a dictator, military, converted himself into civilian ruler under a constitution that he promulgated that was democratic. So it was the second term of the post-constitution era that Ghanaians describe as the fourth Republican Constitution, that I had the opportunity of being selected by my party as the contestant against him. And when, they say champions die hard, when a newcomer jumps into the ring to fight an old champion that had been there, when I say old, I don't mean age, but somebody who'd been sitting on top of the country for 14 years, to take him on, naturally, you'd see the incumbency advantages and other factors working in favor of the occupants against the first-timer rushing to take him on. But even with that, 96 results could not be declared by the Electoral Commission for 5 days. Midst of that period, the Electoral Commission, on record, was asking for protection. Definitely the protection couldn't be sought again from me, because I didn't control any powers or authorities to threaten the Electoral Commission. So some people just were baffled. Why should the Electoral Commission seek protection before declaring results in a straight election between the president and Kufuor? But that was what transpired. And then eventually, the Electoral Commission came out and said the incumbent president had won the election by, I think, 50-something%, and that the first-timer had gained 39-point-something%, which was very impressive on our continent for Africa. So, fortunately, the Constitution, bearing the signature of the incumbent president, had provided for two-term office, if you are lucky for the people to be re-elected. And 96 was the end of the first term of the incumbent, meaning he had only
one term to serve.
One term to serve. The way the elections went, there were elements that were advising that I should even boycott the results as not fair. But I said no, because I just projected that the next time, this man with all the advantages would have to go, and that I would be prepared to take on other people. And that's what happened. 2000, he stepped aside to give way to his vice president, the late President Mills, one who died earlier this year. He had served as vice president under President Rawlings, and so we contested, and the people of Ghana decided to give me the nod. That's how I came to office 2000. I took office 2001 January. So this is the background. But as I say, Rawlings had had a long stretch, and naturally, the incumbency advantage, you know, when you stay in power for some time, you gain a certain image. And he had all that against the first timer.
On January 7th, 2001, you were sworn in as second president of the Fourth Republic of Ghana. And actually that marked the first smooth transition of power between democratic elected government in Ghana since Ghana independence of 1957. What did this signify to you as a leader of this great nation?
Well, my party, we claim, and I strike, I can assure you, that we are the oldest democratic party tradition in the country. Our founding fathers launched the party politics in Ghana in 1947. It was that group that invited Kwame Nkrumah to come from Britain to work with them as their party secretary. Nkrumah served with them for a year or so and then broke away because our party, our tradition was for democracy, for human rights, respect for human rights, for rule of law, for private sector initiative. And Nkrumah, as we all know, was a sort of left of center. And so perhaps ideologically, he couldn't feel comfortable within the group, and he broke away to found his own party, 49. From that time, my party remained loyal in the tradition, always to the basic principles of the founding fathers, democratic governance. I cannot say the same of the other parties. For instance, Nkrumah's party to the 1960s passed a one-party state law. The accommodation for other political viewpoints was not there with that party. And successive parties to the Nkrumah's tradition always also remained loyal to left of center. They tended to be ideological. We were open-minded liberal. And my side never got a chance to form government, even though it's the oldest tradition. And Nkrumah came with the flair and the organization of leftism and so forth and so on, and swept the youth of the country from off their feet. They followed him, and his side continued to win elections. Even after him, it was difficult. But the first time my side got any chance was after 1966, when the soldiers had removed Nkrumah. The soldiers remained in office for 3 years, at the end of which there was a return to constitutional rule, and that was when my side, under the late Professor Buzia, got a short stint after being elected democratically for 2 years, 3 months. That was when I launched myself into politics at the age of 30, as I've recounted. But then, 72 January, the soldiers came back, knocked my side off, because even some of the soldiers, they were all of the leanings of Nkrumah, leftism. So they knocked us off on the slightest pretext of their privileges being denied them by the government in which I served. And from 72 January, my side was firmly kept outside government till my break came 2001. You can see the long period that we were kept in the wilderness. So when 2001, in an open election under a democratic constitution, I won. It was such a refreshing change to me, to my party, and I believe to Ghana. I saw it as a challenge to lead a government to show the people of Ghana that democracy would work here, and that the alternating system of selection would more or less educate the polity, the Ghanaian polity of why we should be tolerant of parties. After all, the Constitution provided for multi-partyism, and I believe there was a wisdom to the Constitution providing for that. When you elect a party to take office for 4 years, that party is not delivering. Come 4 years, you vote it out, because that's a way to also help improve the quality of leadership. You seek office, you are given it for a purpose being to work to improve the quality of life for the people. So when you ask for it and you are given it and you are not able to deliver, the power of the people, which is what the vote is about. Anybody who votes has some of the power of the state. The power of the people should be brought to bear to remove you for the other guy to come and also serve. And along the way, you get the electorate also educating itself on the uses of the votes and the necessity to use the mandate of the people to serve them, to improve the quality of life for all of them. And so 2001, when I got the opportunity, this was the challenge I saw. I have this mandate. I should lead my government to enable Ghanaians to see the difference between the traditions of left of center and liberal governance. And that's what happened.
President Kufuor.
Yes.
That's a very good statement. When you assumed the president that day, did you have a vision for Ghana?
Yes, I had been in politics for already over 30 years. And I believe, and on the opposition side most of the time. So I was driven by the vision. Without that vision, perhaps I would have...
What was your single biggest element in your vision when you assumed the
biggest, I knew Ghana very well. I saw the potential of the country everywhere. It's a rich land, not too big. I believed it would be easily manageable, and that the good governance would unleash the wealth of the country, with which you improve the quality of life by providing social services like education, like healthcare, affordably. For people, when you talk democracy, and the people have the wherewithal to develop as individual human beings within community and responsible citizens, then you get quality of life being improved. You create equality of opportunity for everybody. So I knew Ghana, I knew the resources, and I knew when I had the opportunity, I would lead the country in ways that would help the country realize this vision of everybody prospering. And so when I got the chance, I and my government, I should say that my party, we launched 5 priorities. We saw that the infrastructure, roads, energy, and other things were not in the best of shape. So we said we would, first term, 5 priorities. Vigorous infrastructure development. Second, Ghana is agricultural. Green lands everywhere, water courses. Traditionally, our people have been engaged in agriculture, but on subsistence level. Cocoa, which Ghana had been leader of in the whole world, in cocoa beans. We didn't add value to cocoa. And the farmers were losing the joy of farming because the states, as I said, tended to be socialistic and denying the farmer the proper share of the proceeds of cocoa. Every time government took something like 70% or so of the world price and gave the poor farmer who on his own initiative had acquired the land and planted the farm and all that. And it takes 5 years for the cocoa crop to yield. So you can imagine the unfairness of it. By the end of the century, 2000, some people had started cutting down their trees to do other crops, just so as to avoid the overtaxation they suffered from government. All these things, I just wanted to reverse, to show. And then the other thing is social service education. Education is the key. If you want to build capacity, you want to change people's psychology, culture, and everything for the better, it's through education. But again, we saw that education was in a parlor state. Healthcare, that time, the policy was cynically described by Ghanaians as cash and carry, meaning if you fell ill and you didn't have money, you die. You couldn't access because you couldn't pay for your hospital bills. And the government hospitals in many places were boarded up. So I said, no, that was unconscionable. So we needed to do something about it. And of course, all these things issued out of good governance. And for me and my party, good governance and democratization, we believe power really belonged with the people, and that it was with the mandate of the people as expressed through the votes that the government comes into office. So government should be answerable and accountable to the people. And it's when a government works like this that government can then expect responsibility from citizenry. So that was it. The fifth one was private sector development. I've told you Ghana is so rich naturally in terms of mineral resources, good lands, and good quality human beings. With training, Ghanaian shines everywhere. Unfortunately, as at the point we came in, whilst Ghanaians shone everywhere, in Ghana, the citizen was not happy. No, people were withdrawing into themselves. So, and it was all because the state wanted to do everything. But the state hasn't been efficient, say with business. We believe government's business should be to govern, set the framework, and allow the individual also to aspire, and also to keep some of the benefit legitimately for themselves. And that way, with reasonable tax regime, such a citizen would also contribute to. So, fifth priority was allow the private sector to grow. So the talk of private sector being the engine of growth would be achieved, realized. So with these 5 things, for the first year, we assumed government, we saw the macroeconomic front was not good. Ghana was overburdened with debts all over. In fact, we were virtually insolvent, and we weren't credit-worthy. Everywhere we turned to get the money to do these priorities, we were not getting the help. And this was why my government took the highly indebted poor country initiative. Reluctantly, it wasn't popular, but we decided to go ahead because that was the way to lift the burden of debt from the states and create the free atmosphere in which to begin to implement. And this was how. So this is how we tackled our vision.